Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Victorius, Dinosaur Warfare Part 2, The Great Ninja War, out June 24th on Napalm Records. The album has 12 tracks, 46 minutes in length, and this is the band's 6th full-length studio album. They are a German power metal band, and when it comes to power metal, everybody wants some cheese in their power metal, and nobody brings the cheese as much as Victorius. I mean, they're bringing storylines from 2 previous releases, an EP and a full-length record, that merges dinosaurs with ninjas. How much more cheese can you ask for than that? I didn't think that those 2 worlds could collide, but somehow Victorius find a way of making it happen, and here we are. Now, as far as the design of the record, this is an album that has continuous flow. Now, the flow changes in terms of the speed, the momentum that the album gives the listener, but at times it really feels like you're not being transported, you're rather being pushed forward by the way the album is designed, by the force that it has, by the way it moves you along. The album needed something that would allow you to better understand where you are within the story, and at the same time give you a chance of a break, of a breather, so that the album is easier to digest. What I'm talking about is an interlude. This record could have really used something in the middle of the album that would tie in the story, allow you to understand exactly where you are, where you're heading story-wise, and at the same time, take a break, take a breath, take a step back from the album, allow you to better understand what happened up until that point, and better prepare you for what's going to happen from that point forward. Without that, the album feels a little bit pushed, it feels a little bit rushed. Even though it's not short in length, it still feels rushed because of the nature of the sound and the nature of the experience that that sound creates. As far as the soundscape goes, this is a symphonic laced power metal album, undeniable. Every song has an impact or suffers an impact from the symphonic elements that they introduced to the overall soundscape. Some songs more, some songs less, but it's there on every single track. Now, the nuances of how much you're going to get from it is really what's going to create the ripples or the ebbs and flows from track to track. Some songs feel more cinematic because they depend more heavily sound-wise and atmospherically wise on those symphonic elements. Some songs feel just more like straight up power metal with some symphonic elements in the backdrop in order to create some melodies, in order to better define the shapes of the songs, but not necessarily impacting the atmosphere as much as the cinematic tracks. So this is kind of the nuances that this album offers sound-wise. Is a very rich sounding album, because whenever you can bring these elements together, merge them really well, and then use the best characteristics of them all in order for you to keep an album together, balanced, but still very fluid, very interesting, and very engaging, you really have the winning formula. And this album, sound-wise, feels that way. You never get tired of something within this record. You don't get tired of the symphonic elements because they're not always necessarily in your face. You don't get tired of how the drums come across or how much chunkiness you have on the guitars, because they don't do that often. They switch around the parameters of what's moving these tracks or what's creating the energy within these tracks. It's constantly evolving, it's constantly growing, it's constantly moving, and because of that, the sound on this record is not only rich, but it's very interesting because it allows you to feel different things at different turns in different moments within the record. Very well put together album. The mixing, the mastering really helps define these tracks. This is an album that also depends heavily on the lyrical content. You're telling stories, you want the listener to gravitate towards those stories, to be connected with those stories, and then the sound becomes the soundtrack of the stories that they're telling you. So having quality mixing, production behind it definitely helps and makes the album feel a lot more together. It makes feel the album a lot more polished. And you need that if you're going to grasp and if you're going to be able to keep the attention of the listener throughout the entire experience of this record. So I like the sound, I like the energy, I like the 80s synth elements that the record has. I like the cinematic approach of some of the tracks. I like when those cinematic approaches completely drop out and the song feels more like a natural power metal song. So all of these little nuances that exist within this record really make the sound stand out, not becoming redundant, not becoming repetitive, not becoming boring. So from a soundscape perspective, this album feels very rich at every single turn. Now, within that sound, I talked about the symphonic elements, the impacts that they have, but I really feel like I have to talk about the drums and guitars because I really enjoyed the drum sound and the guitar sound on this record. I don't feel like either one of them really controls the experience. This is not an album that is driven just by one element. It's rather an album that's driven by the conglomerate of elements. But when the drums are heavy, when the drums are powerful, you can really feel it. They really create an aroma that permeates throughout the entire track and it's impossible not to notice how much they're pushing, how much force they're adding, how much energy they are inducing into these tracks. Same thing could be said for the guitars, either in the melodies and the leads or even in the solos. The guitar sound on this album always has energy, always has life, sometimes a little bit more driven, sometimes a little bit more thick, depending on the nature of the track. More epic sounding songs, the guitars permeate a lot better throughout the entire soundscape, merging better with the drums and symphonic elements in order to create that big wall of sound. And songs that are more power metal driven, they have more of an independent role, feeling a little bit thicker, a little bit chunkier, using some of the force that exists, some of the heaviness that exists on the drums to really separate themselves ever so slightly, so you can better notice them and you can better notice exactly what they're doing within those very specific songs. Now vocally, this is a very strong album. It's not an album that is going to surprise you, because if you're a fan of the band, you know exactly what you're going to get vocally, and this album stays very close to home from that perspective. But I love the tonality, I love the delivery. It's almost more of a storytelling approach that it is trying to be over the top and trying to do something that sparks interest from the listener. The listener is going to be interested in this album regardless. You just need someone that can tell you a story, that can grasp the concept of the story and then allow that story to come to life with the way that they're telling you, having the perfect tone, the perfect delivery, using some backing vocals, some layers in some parts of the songs in order to make more of a bombastic feel, in order to create more of a sense of an anthem. This album has a lot of anthems in it, and that adds to the overall cinematic feel that the record has. So overall, I just felt like the vocals were very complete within the parameters that they have. They didn't go outside the box. They didn't try to do something different, something new, something that I hadn't seen before from this band. They stayed very controlled, they stayed very close to home, but they did what they were supposed to do, and they added value to the overall experience of listening to this album. Was there room for them to go a little bit further, to push the envelope? There's always room for that. But they decided to keep them a little bit more controlled, let the sound do its thing, let the sound create the movement, and then the vocals staying a little bit more in the pocket, because once again, telling that story becomes really important for a record like this. All around, this is a Victorious album. If you're a fan of the band, this album is not going to surprise you, but this is also an album that's not going to make you lose your interest in what the band has been doing. It's a very safe record for this band. Perhaps the topics are not safe because I didn't expect them to bring these two worlds together as one, but as far as what you're going to get, the end result, this is what I was expecting coming in. This is the Victorious album that feels like gives you a sense of continuity from their previous record, at the same time not changing that much of the DNA of the band in the process. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, Jurassic Jetfighters, that's the first one that jumped to my mind when I was putting this list together, when I was listening to this record, because it has a great tempo. The guitars, the drums really pack the sound, and then the vocals carry the listener through it. You start to connect with those vocals first and foremost, and then the sound behind it helps the movement and helps you go along for the ride. It gives the track also a bigger impact when you see the backing vocals coming in, adding volume, adding presence, igniting, pushing the vocals into the forefront, allowing them to have a little bit more of a center stage, and then the symphonic feel behind the track creates a cinematic approach that the overall song has. This is a very cinematic driven song from the beginning all the way to the end. It has this 80s synth sound that impacts the way you experience the song and makes the power metal feel a lot more out there. It gives you almost this sense of outer space, gives you a sci-fi vibe. This is a track that how it sounds almost like something out of a sci-fi movie, or at least a sci-fi comedy, because obviously the lyrical content is not super serious, so you have to look at it from that perspective. But it's a very bombastic, very well crafted, very well designed song, all around super fun to listen to. Next you have God of Roar, an anthem. This album is filled with them, and this one really jumps out because it's really well put together, has great volume, great drums, great guitars, the way they work with one another, really pairing up, allowing you to feel the brunt of their force from beginning to end. Perhaps a more traditional power metal song. Not that this album has anything traditional about it, but this song perhaps feels a little bit more in that vein. Using backing vocals in the chorus allows the chorus to jump out. It allows the verses to be more contained, more direct, more to the point, have a more direct impact in how you perceive the song, and then the chorus feels very bombastic, over the top. Exactly what you need in a song like this. You need to create the ebbs and flows between verses and chorus, and they used the vocals predominantly to create those ebbs and flows. Now, last but not least, Triceps Ceratops. This is a big sounding track. This is symphonic power metal at its best. It feels like just larger than life. It's this epic cinematic song that has so much to give. The sound experience is magnificent. So many different layers, so much for you to peel, for you to understand, for you to enjoy when you listen to a song like this. It just feels like everything is coming at you so fast, but there's so much that you're always missing something, regardless of how much attention you're paying to it. The sound is larger than life. The vocals feel larger than life, even though they're very contained. They have power, they have tone. The backing vocals, the layers, once again, making them feel a lot bigger. Is a track that has great energy, great sound. It has great momentum. The cinematic touch that exists throughout this entire track really becomes the calling card of how you're going to perceive this song. A song that definitely is going to stay within your mind because of the nature, because of how it moves, and how it makes you feel, and how it sounds. Just a magnificent track all around. This is it, Victorius with Dinosaur Warfare Part 2, The Great Ninja War. What a title. Out June 24th on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.